Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Brian. We're going to start off today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is you want me to check out. Today's special selection is from Spiderland, Shallow, Like Your Breath, by Elliot. So let's dive into this. I have no idea what we're going in for on this. I don't know who Elliot is. I don't know if that is a band or an artist name. Things are getting real weird these days. I've seen bands that are just the names of people. So, I don't know. Let's hit it, find out what's going on. This is from 2000 off the album False Cathedrals. Oh, it didn't quite pick up how I thought we would. Eerie and minimal with great production. I love the bass from our first section, but the muted drums here are really nice. Very spacious, great use of placement. A nice expansion, or sort of a combination of our first and second ideas with expanded harmony on top of it. I keep defying my expectations. I keep expecting these big moments and they don't. Very cool idea. Are we actually going to do it? I really like how the band got louder, but the vocals didn't. The vocals are not enveloped by the music. So it's really interesting. We're getting a crash on 4 and 1. Yeah, this is kind of bizarre. Solid track. I do want to talk about that ending real quick before we get into other things. For a second there, I thought we were cutting the phrase short by just a little bit because the ending moment right there, prior to like the build up in their final 3 or 4 bars, the I don't know, 16 bars prior to that, all had this idea where the downbeat of 1 is a crash cymbal. And we have 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, crash, 2, 3, 4, right? So it creates this um, landmark in my mind. When we hit the crash, we're repeating the phrase. Very simple, 2 bar phrase, crash at the beginning. And then out of nowhere, we begin to crash on the second 4, which makes it feel like we are starting our new phrase on beat 8 instead of after beat 8. It makes it feel like it's a 7-beat phrase now. And it took me a couple repetitions to figure out what was going on, was that we were crashing on both 4 and 1. And every single time it feels like we jumped the gun and we're like, we'll just play it again. We started the phrase 1 beat early, and instead of trying to force this in, we'll just play it on the beat it's supposed to be on too. And there's a disjointedness to it that is really set up because of how they introduced this section originally. They gave me a flag, and then they subverted that. And they said, actually, that landmark we told you about, it's not always going to be like that. It's not always going to be a legend for the map. And it makes the ending feel a bit topsy-turvy, a little twisty and maze-like up until you get a grasp on it. I don't know if that's necessarily what they aimed for, but the way that it's set up feels very intentional. So, regardless, I think, of if they were specifically wanting me to feel lost in those final moments, they did set up a precedent and then subvert the precedent they themselves created. It just makes for a little bit of an interesting end to that track, where everything else is, for the most part, easy to follow if they don't always go where I expect them to. Or I should say, despite them not always going where I expect them to. Now, I said this is interesting, and I think it's primarily because I listened to so much similar music in 2000 when this came out. Or I should say, probably a little after this came out. Generally in the same time frame, though. I don't know that I was listening to emo in 2000, but certainly in the 2000s, I discovered it. And what's really interesting is that this was around the time when many emo bands were also beginning to explore electronic music. And so we would often find that in an album of emo music, there would typically be a ballad that explored electronic landscapes, down-tempo speeds, and if you can believe it, more emotive performance from the vocalist. Just usually going for more of a heartbreaking sound than an angsty sort of emotiveness. Hence the ballad. This electronic ballad feels so iterative for the time, but I also don't know where its placement is. I kind of view this part as being like mid to late 2000s, and seeing this come out in the year 2000 feels like it was a bit ahead of its time, and it might have even been the template for why so many future bands decided to do something similar. Um, so yeah, that's why I said it was kind of bizarre. It feels This song took me so far back into my teenage childhood. It was kind of wild how easily and effortlessly it transported me despite not having heard this song ever in my life. It's so familiar to me. So, what do we have going on here? We have some guitars, we have some drums, we have some synths, we have vocals. It is a bit on the slower side. Tempo-wise, the majority of the track takes place in 4/4. All the track. Yeah, the whole thing takes place in 4/4. The music is expertly produced with a ton of space. It's not quite as clean as I think it might have been done if it were a modern take on it, and it's possible that any remaster would clean it up a little bit. But here we have, it's a bit cluttered, a bit compressed, very 2000s sound, but there's a spaciousness to it all that at least informs me they wanted something higher production. Um, I don't necessarily know if they specifically would have done something different with modern technology, but they're at least going for a spaciousness and they have a clear understanding of the production of this track and what they're aiming for. There is plenty of space within the track, plenty of space between instruments, and there's quite a bit of use of space as well. Even in the sparser sections, instruments may be placed far off on one side, and there's plenty of panning that goes on as well. It is a very large sound sphere, even if it never really gets fully utilized, and it creates a vastness that the sparseness of the music implies to me a type of loneliness, a vast empty space, desolate, nothing but our singer here and a couple of noises around them. It's isolating completely. The instruments I find interesting because, again, on the production side, everything's a bit quiet in our introduction, but in our second section here, almost all the instruments get compressed down, pushed way into the background. The vocals feel almost by themselves, singing next to a distant memory of the music. It's phenomenal imagery created right there. And so I think it's awesome that as the instruments come back into focus and we come to the end of the track, and after so many false starts, we finally have the big moment, what everything's been building to. All the instruments get a presence increase, they get a volume increase, everything except the vocals. The vocals are left to be drowned out by the music. They aren't allowed to gain that presence, that prominence, or that volume like everything else does, and it further leans into the idea that the music is an entity or a void or a realm that the lyrics, the vocals sit within. They don't act as one to create a song, they are always in opposition as two separate identities, two separate components of this track. The music shifts and moves and warps and is manipulated around the track while the vocals are front, center, and static. Everything else about the track is dynamic. Sounds start from one side and go to the other. They ping pong back and forth in a type of hocket. They have rising and falling volumes, but the vocals are consistent, always the same. And so when the song rises up to new peaks, the vocals are drowned out by them. It's difficult to even hear them. They are on a completely different element, a completely different aspect of the song than the instruments are, and I find that to be fascinating. I'm not a big fan of vocals getting pushed into the mix. I love this. I've said it a million times in the past. Usually, I'm not a fan of doing something exclusively, but if you want to take that idea and put it into a giant soup of a bunch of things as a spice, I'm there for it. The same thing is with djent. I'm not a big fan of purely rhythmic things, but you put djent into a metalcore track as a breakdown, I'm here for it. It sounds great. Same thing with harsh vocals, same thing with just a lot of stuff. I will take things in small doses for an artistic purpose. And when you present vocals that are pushed way down into the mix, almost that I can't hear them, I'm not gonna really enjoy that. But you tell me it's for an artistic purpose, you build a narrative around it. Yes, 100%, I am there every single time. I dig the use of the electronic versus the, especially acoustic guitars. I think that sounds really interesting. Electric guitars and electronic sounds both have a digitizedness to them, which is why I think they work so well in a lot of modern metal. It was sort of a match that why did it take so long kind of deal. I know there have been bands experimenting with it for decades now, but like it's really something that should have hit the mainstream a long time ago. And I wonder if there wasn't just, typical fandom negative reactions to it. We can't have electronic music. That's not metal. And the electronic guys are like, metal's just noise. We can't have that in here. That kind of stuff, right? Sentiments towards the genre holding it back. Whereas we just have a more open audience these days. Everything seems to get mashed together. So it just kind of seemed like the time to do it. Um, but I really like here, where we have the acoustic sounds paired with the electronic sounds, and it creates a juxtaposition that really allows both to flourish, but also they do a fantastic job at kind of reining in the electronic sounds in order to make them sound just a hair bit more natural. There's a lot of rounding off of tone and grittying up of some of the synth tones in order to create something that fits better into this kind of mid-fi sounds. It's a bit gritty. It's got some distortion and destruction going throughout it. Little pops and crackles. It's compressed a bit more than traditional electronic would be. And so the sounds themselves also carry some of this in order to feel more at home in this indie rock, Midwest emo kind of collection of timbres. But it's still very distinctly synth and acoustic guitar in a lot of these places, and it just sounds really cool together. Now, talking about together, we've talked about how cohesive this is thematically, production wise. It's not all connected, but there is connection in the disconnect. There's two places in here, one where they defy expectations based on iterative writing, which is where they got me at the beginning. Having, those 4 beats of silence after a second section, and I was like, and the drop. And then we got the snare hit, but then no drop. And then 4 beats later, I was like, okay, this is it. And then we just got our compressed, muted, pushed into the background instrument section. Both of these were underwhelming compared to what I was expecting based on how many bands have done it in the past. It's a very popular post-hardcore emo style of thing to do there. But the second time was around the 2.5 minute mark, right in the middle of the track, when we had the drum build-up. Quarter notes, rising intensity, rising volume, rising velocity. Everything is building up. The strumming of the guitar is getting louder, and then it just goes nowhere. Again, I'm waiting for a big, impactful moment, and nothing happens. The fact that this occurs twice before we finally get a build-up into a payoff again feels intentional. I don't know what the story is yet. I'm hoping the lyrics might clue me in a little more, but there is this concept of unfulfillment in the track, whether it is the distance of the instruments compared to the vocals. There's the isolation there as well. There's the buildup that doesn't go where you expect it to go. I'm sure we're going to find aspects of this in the lyrics as well. But what I really love is that when we get that big moment, it's too much. Sort of a monkey's paw wish, where the vocals get drowned out. And I love the narrative this tells. It's difficult to get this thing going, and we're kind of let down multiple times. It's kind of getting lonely and dreary here in this slow, meandering pace, and when we think there's going to get some action going, there isn't. But when there is, it's more than we asked for. And with that, I think it is time to touch on some lyrics and see what's going on there. Interestingly, it speaks about a falling out between two people and the collateral damage, presumably within their friends and families, that were caught in it. All of it wrapped up into the metaphor of an earthquake. It says down here, we're caught under the waste of our dilutions that fell among the quake. Help me try to understand the great diversion that came and tore us down. There's an element here that our narrator, our singer at least, is not ready to move on, not ready for this to be over, but they understand it's going to be tough, if possibly impossible, to bring it back. It says, lean on to me, lean into me. Comfort I once knew slowly disappears, reverberate, shaking at the core, holding up your own by letting go our grasp. I really like that last line. Finding the way to stand on your own by letting go of someone else. Talks about how they have their own scars that they've shown each other and no one else. That leans into the idea that they know each other very well, possibly going to continue this idea of, hey, maybe we should give this another shot kind of vibe. But by the end of it, he recognizes everything that's wrong. He says, let's turn the lights out. Let's shut it all off. It's time we count all the victims that were caught in our last explosion. It's possible by saying last explosion means that there were ones prior. That the quake created this time was only the most recent, and that their relationship has been tumultuous and has impacted people other than the two of them before. That's how the track ends. And the music kind of feels like a possible rendition of the relationship, the isolation of it, the distance between the two, eventually rising up, the false crescendo in the middle of the track could either be the no, yeah, it definitely is a boiling of the relationship. It never quite hits the peak where it falls apart, but you can feel the tensions rising. Things aren't working anymore, but they bottom back out. Let's just pretend it didn't happen. Let's just push forward. Let's sweep that little issue under the rug. But it can only stay swept under the rug for so long before we get another buildup that explodes, causing a massive sound that overwhelms and drowns the main vocals here. There's no coming back from this. It is too much to recover from. And the vocalist gets buried under the rubble of this latest problem. They call it an explosion, they call it a quake. They get buried under it though. Yeah, I think a lot of this works together well. They do a great job outlining some of the ideas in the lyrics with their music. Those are my thoughts on Elliot's Shallow, Like Your Breath. Let me know what you thought of it, though. Anything that stood out to you? You'd like to add on to what I said? Correct me on. Tell me your own perspective or opinion on. Throw that stuff down in the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you to this menu. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. Alright, that wraps this one up. Till next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.